There's something going on. Crowd loving it. It's a ball, fly ball. Home run!
So the big deal last year, of course, was the Miami Heat. It was one of the big deals. There were several big storylines in the NBA, but the Miami Heat got their title. LeBron, Bosh, D-Wade. Do the Heat have a chance to repeat this year? Are they that good? Are they a dynasty now?
The Heat have added some veteran players. They've added Ray Allen and they added Rashard Lewis. So they have some veteran leadership. Now LeBron is the best player in the NBA. That's the reality of it. The guy can play 5 positions on the court. You give him just a little bit of talent, he can create a mountain out of that. I mean, you look what he did with Cleveland a couple years ago getting to the NBA Finals. It was just basically LeBron with 4 other guys on the court. The Heat are great. Now, what's happening now, and the NBA is sort of sliding to this, and I'm not a big fan of this, as you and I have talked about before, is that you're starting to get power teams, where you're getting the Heat, 3 main guys. You have, now the Lakers have a solid 5 players. You have Oklahoma, who did very well last year in the finals. You could look at New York Knicks, who have some big time players. The Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, are starting to get some big time players. Philadelphia, Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting the major markets that are having big 3 guys, just like Boston did a few years ago. But then it's creating really piss poor teams as we go down the line, because normally those teams would have players to go on.
They have the one superstar with a couple of helpers.
So your question, going back to that, is can Miami do it again? Absolutely. I don't know if there's a team in the East that can handle them right now, especially with Derrick Rose being out. Now, when Derrick Rose returns, which should be sometime in March, Chicago would be a team I'd be worried. I mean, that was the concern last year, that Chicago was going to be the team that could handle the Heat because they had all the pieces.
Yeah.
Chicago has lost a couple of pieces this year, and the fact that Rose is hurt means that their record probably won't be as great as it probably could have been with Derrick Rose in the lineup. But be that as it may, that would be the one team in the East I would see as the contender to take out the Heat. In the West, with the Lakers getting Howard and Nash, sometimes they don't gel right away, and I'd be interested to see how that's gonna mesh.
That was what I was going to ask you too, about down those lines of.
But saying that, I mean, we're both Canadian. We've watched Nash play. Nash is not a guy that...
He's not going to cause a stir.
No, he is the guy who's going to bring them together, I think. I mean, he's a real big asset because he passes the ball so well and brings everybody into play. Mm-hmm. Howard, on the other hand, has been a little bit of a headache in the last couple of years in Orlando.
Man.
However, going into a locker room where you have Pau Gasol, Kobe Bryant, and Steve Nash, that might be exactly what a guy like him needs, where he's now around guys that have been there before and have won and know how to win.
Yeah, he's not the big man. I mean, well, he's the big man, but he's not the man because he hasn't won. He can't use that, right? I mean, he is, small man on the totem pole, no pun intended, with his actual height.
But saying that, he might be the best guy on the roster. He might be the best player on the roster.
Right.
So I think the Lakers, if they can get it together by the end of the year, I think they have just as legitimate shot as the Heat or the Thunder. And I mean, I think the Thunder are still there. They're too young or too talented not to be consideration for them right now.
So in the East, you're looking. I'm going from what you just said there. You're thinking the Heat are got to be the odds-on favorite coming out of the East.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, the Nets, the Bulls when they're healthy, and the Knicks are going to be.
I'm not a big fan of the Knicks. I'll tell you right now. Not a big fan. I just think defensively they're not there. Like letting go of a couple of guys that they let go of. Like even Fields, who came to the Raptors. Yes, he's not scoring you a lot of points, but he's going to give you that glue guy, that guy who's playing defense, the guy who's grabbing rebounds. I mean, he's a better defensive player than Carmelo Anthony is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if Anthony's your stopper, well, he's not stopping many guys.
Yeah.
I do like the Pacers. The Pacers did really well last year. I think they were a very young team last year. They're only going to get better this year. So I think the Pacers are some team to look out for. And I do think if Andrew Bynum can stay healthy, I think Philadelphia was not a fluke last year. I think the addition of Bynum in that lineup helps them immensely. So I think Philadelphia is a good team.
And where does the Celtics sit in all that?
I'm a little bit more worried of the Celtics. Now, saying that, Rondo's there, and Rondo's a young, great point guard, and I think he can carry them a long way. But we've all seen what happens to older players in the NBA. Pierce and Garnett were wonderful last year. They got them to where I think they got to the conference finals versus the Heat, actually. And they were within one game of winning. I think they can surprise anybody, but I think unlike last year where it was 66 games, this is a full 82 game season.
Right.
Their bodies are probably more
The old legs
prone
might.
to break down a bit. While I still like them, I think they're definitely starting to go down a bit.
So, having said that, I'm just thinking in my head here. If you're worried about the Knicks and you're worried about the Celtics, you think the Pacers might be a bit of a surprise team. There's 3 teams right there. We went over a team. Even you said the Nets were defensively maybe a little weak, but if you look at the other teams you mentioned in the Bulls and the Heat, obviously, that's how many teams we just mentioned there. 6.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 more playoff teams to come out of the East potentially. But if those teams, the Celtics and the Knicks, and potentially the Nets, maybe even the Pacers, down at the bottom of the bracket, and you could have a pretty interesting first round if you've got teams like the Heat against the Celtics and the Bulls against the Knicks. I mean, those are some pretty prime markets.
It's true.
That could be facing
probably what I would suggest to you this year would be the Pacers and the Heat will be the top 2 teams in the East.
Mm-hmm.
I think Philadelphia will be very close to that, and then you can't discount the Hawks. The Hawks always have a good team. They haven't really lost anybody. The Bulls will be fine. They did get Heinrich to cover Rose while he's injured. So I think there are teams that are good enough to maintain status quo. I think the Heat should just run away with the whole thing. The Pacers will be the next closest team. That's how good I think the Pacers can be. I think the Bulls could be great when D Rose returns.
That could be a great addition late in the season.
Late in the season. But I think the problem is that they may finish 6th or 5th or 6th, where they're not playing the Heat in the first round, but they're playing a 3 seed. With you'd be happy to get a 3 seed, but then when you look at the Bulls with Derrick Rose on it, then you're not so happy about it.
Right.
And that's where you get into the teams like the Wizards and the Raptors, who I see as guys who could fight for the 8th and 7th seed, and I do like those teams probably better than I like the Knicks.
You like those? Really? Okay, that's surprising. I would.
Well,
I mean, again, we're in a bubble up here in Toronto where you don't read anything about Toronto. If you read anything other than the Toronto media, you read any of the U.S. websites, papers, whatever, there is no mention of the Raptors whatsoever other than their young team. So I mean, they're always going to pick the Knicks ahead of the Raptors. But it's interesting if you think the Knicks could be the team or the Knicks could be a team on the outside looking in.
Well, listen, I mean, they signed quote-unquote marquee guys.
Yeah.
But Jason Kidd is not the Jason Kidd we knew when he was 32.
No.
And Rasheed Wallace, when he played for the Pistons, is not the same guy they just signed this week to be their backup power forward. I mean, the Knicks have marquee guys, but none of them are superstars. You can consider the fact that Stoudemire was great when he played with Nash, but he's a horrible defensive player.
Yeah.
And Carmelo Anthony is a great offensive player. There's no question about it. That guy can hit great shots, and he's very creative on the offensive end. He can't stop anybody. So when you look at the defensive end of it, and you look at the age of the team, I mean, you look at Stoudemire, Chandler, and Anthony as their big 3. The rest of the complementary players are not as good as they probably should be.
So the Knicks are going to have to score 130 points a night to win.
Right, and they'll win games. There's no question they will win games, but I just think defensively they just won't have it.
Right. Okay. So we've got, at this point anyway, preliminary, I mean, you're going to do a big preview and stuff like that of the NBA. But at this point, just glancing at it, you like the Heat coming out of the East as the big guy.
Right now, I think that would be stupid for me to say it's somebody else. If there was a surprise team, it would definitely be Chicago. Chicago could be a surprise team only because people won't expect much out of them at the beginning, right? So Chicago will come out of nowhere in the terms of, they're not good all year, and all of a sudden Derrick Rose returns, people forget that Derrick Rose is returning, then boom, here they come. And you got to also remember that they have a great coach, and the coach can work with the players, and if the coach can make a difference, then maybe Chicago isn't as bad as people are going to assume they're going to be to begin the year without Derrick Rose. I mean, they still have Joakim Noah. They still have Carl Boozer.
Yeah, to me, they seem like a really strong team. They're just missing their big gun.
Their big gun. So that's what I mean. You can't discount the Bulls as a team that could be relevant throughout the season and then become very relevant once Derrick Rose returns.
Okay, so for me now, what I do follow is the Raptors, and so that means I follow the East a little more than the West. So I pay more attention to the East. To me, the East seems to be heavily weighted with superstars compared to the West. But in the West, we do have obviously the big team is the Lakers. They get the most media out there. Although the Clippers look fantastic, they sort of faded. And like you mentioned, the Thunder, the Houston Rockets. What about San Antonio? What about the Mavs?
If you're going to look at the West, you're definitely looking at the top end teams being San Antonio again this year. The team plays as a team, and that makes a difference over the long haul. Then you look at, if you got San Antonio is going to be good, the Clippers are also going to be good. I mean, that's another year where they were able to gel last year. Blake Griffin's great. Chris Paul is obviously clearly great. They signed Grant Hill, not the Grant Hill we used to know, but he's still a reasonable player to have.
He's a veteran.
I mean, they have a great team as well. Then you got obviously the teams we just talked about, where the Thunder will be a team to reckon with. I like Minnesota this year. I think that's a dark horse team for me.
You don't hear that very often.
I think Minnesota is a team that I would definitely be on the lookout for. And then the Rockets I have no interest in. I'm just trying to go through the teams. I like the Nuggets. They play as a cohesive unit, but I think the Rockets probably, or not the Rockets, the Nuggets probably just don't have the top end guys to compete for the titles.
Yeah, and so the West to me, I mean, it just doesn't seem anywhere near as strong to me as the East. Granted, I think the top teams in the West are quite strong. It just, again, I don't see them having as many horses as the East.
No, I mean Memphis is always going to be in there in the mix, but they're not a top end team in my opinion. Dallas is getting a lot older. They signed a lot of veterans this offseason. And then you look at other teams. Golden State's not close yet. Utah's not close. Portland's not close.
Phoenix is way off.
Phoenix is way off. Really, if I look at it, I really am excited for Minnesota. Minnesota was able to sign Brandon Roy, who had a surgery on his knee that might return him to some past glory. That would be great news if he's able to return and do something. Ricky Rubio, you got some real key guys. The team is starting to come together and having some actual players, and that's pretty exciting to see.
So the West seems a little more open. Granted.
West does seem a little bit more open. I would suggest that there are some real garbage teams in the West, and you have some real high-end teams in the West.
Right. So you've got the real polar opposite syndrome going there. So I'm going to guess, though, Lakers got to be the odds-on favorite coming out of the West.
Lakers or Oklahoma City. I think they would be on par with one another. Right?
Yeah.
Only because I think the Lakers have a great starting five, but I'm not sure that their bench is as deep.
Right.
And where you have a guy like Nash, who's a great point guard, and Kobe can help him with the point guard duties if he's off. I'm not sure they have a second tier point guard that can complement the first unit. I mean,
you could see a huge drop.
Yeah, Steve Blake's a good player, but he's not a playmaker like Nash is, right?
So in other words, if you're playing the Lakers, you're hoping to get to their bench real fast. You
would hope
to
get to their
tire them out quick.
Right, and I mean that's the one thing with Howard that's always been the key, right? If Howard's on the court, you're probably looking to foul him because he's a horrible free throw shooter. So.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, you mentioned who you thought might be a surprise in the West, and that was Minnesota. Having said all that, we've got kind of a breakdown here on who's going to do what and who's going to do what in both divisions, both conferences. Do you see a player to look out for this year, or is this LeBron's year to be the most dominant player?
Oh, I think LeBron is the man.
He's the MVP this year.
The man. There's no question. I think before we got into this podcast, you mentioned to me that Barkley suggested that LeBron could be better than MJ.
Yeah, he's bigger, he's stronger.
And listen, I think he's absolutely right. I was a big MJ fan growing up. My age group determined that he would be my favorite player. LeBron is able to play 5 positions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the crazy thing about Jordan was able to be so clutch at such certain times.
Yeah.
That was the best part about Jordan.
Yeah, oh jeez, yeah. I mean, come on.
But LeBron is capable of doing a triple-double every night, no questions asked. He is the full complement to an NBA player. I mean, rebounds, assists, points, steals. He's able to do every single aspect of the game, and that makes him completely dangerous and completely unstoppable.
In baseball, he'd be a 5-tool player.
Absolutely. He'd be your Mike Trout, I guess.
Right.
Of
That's
your
what I was
NBA.
thinking right away. Yeah. He can do just about everything. I mean, again, you talk about generations. I grew up watching Bird and Johnson, and then Michael Jordan. Right. So for me to think of anybody in the current era outshining those particular players in that era, I have a hard time doing that. Mainly because the longevity hasn't been there yet.
And in saying that, if you look at LeBron's game and you compare it to Magic Johnson's, there's definitely a lot of similarities. I mean, if you look at both those players, that's who I would probably compare LeBron James, closest he was Magic Johnson.
More Magic than MJ.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because Magic was able to see the court so well, and he was so big. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, huge
he was what, 6'9" or something? I think.
Yeah,
Something like
6'7", 6'8", somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
he was a tall point
6'9".
guard. And then remember when he got AIDS and returned, or he got HIV virus, not AIDS. He returned. He was a center for the Lakers when he
Lakers,
returned.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's what it was. You know,
Short center.
But that's what I'm saying, where it's like he's able to play all of his positions as well. And he had a vision for the court, just like LeBron has a vision for the court. Big guy, able to do a whole bunch.